Garland Nixon here with my dear friend Christine Solomonic. Christine, welcome to my YouTube channel.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And we're going to talk about Julian Assange. There's been some things happening here recently. We're going to update you just a little bit, and then we're going to chat about Julian Assange. Let's talk. Hello. Garland Nixon, Christine Solomonic here. Christine worked with a group called Action for Assange. You may know, you might have heard of them recently. They just got kicked off Twitter. They had like 16,000 followers. It was a fairly benign. They would update, Twitter account. They would update people on what was happening with Julian Assange. They would let people know when there were events going on, up and coming, and just like that, Christine. Like a couple weeks ago, some of my friends, Steve over at Slow News, they contacted me and said, "You're not going to believe it. They shut them down." What are your thoughts on the censorship, and in particular when it comes to Assange?
I'm not really surprised by it. I figured, it was only a matter of time before they started to get to even the accounts that are just helpful in like organizing for Julian Assange. And it's just every day we're seeing more and more of it across different spectrums and around different issues that are really important to what's currently going on.
Yeah, let's start by updating people. I'm going to Consortium News. Now, I'm not just saying this because I'm on the board of Consortium News, but Consortium News is a great site. And when it comes to Assange, Joe Loria, the people over at the Consortium News, they will update you on everything. They cover everything. Oftentimes, when there are protests, they will stream them live. The protest that Christine was at recently at the Department of Justice in DC was streamed live on Consortium News. So if you haven't been keeping up with them, that's a great site. All right, so they've got it here. The High Court in London has allowed Julian Assange leave to appeal its own ruling to the UK Supreme Court. The High Court ruled in December that Assange can be extradited to the US, overturning the district court's decision. The High Court of England and Wales, in essence, allowed Julian Assange to the right to appeal to the UK Supreme Court last month's High Court judgment permitting Assange's extradition to the United States. One of the things that I found interesting was that the U.S. came in and the U.S. attorneys, and they gave these assurances of things they wouldn't do. Oh, no, we would never torture Assange, and you can trust us. And they said things like, we might send him to Australia. Would it be better if we send him to Australia? And they gave all these assurances. And I'm thinking, when I think of the deals that the U.S. State Department has made, that the U.S. government has made time and time again, and pretty much reneged on all of them, I find it quite disturbing that any court in any land would listen to the U.S. coming in with kind of a self-serving motive at the last minute, saying, "Well, things aren't working out for us. Here's what we'll do. We'll give you some assurances." And I don't think that the British court actually believed the U.S. assurances that they wouldn't torture him or that they wouldn't do this and such. I think that I don't know about you, Christine. I'll ask you. I think it's part of a scheme. I think it's part of a scam. And I think this whole thing is a kangaroo court. What are your thoughts?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it goes to show the complicity that the UK courts have in this, where they decided that he shouldn't be extradited and was set to be released, but then denied his bail to keep him in Belmarsh, on top of then being when the US essentially was like, "Oh, we'll be good. Like, we won't do anything bad. Like, if you thought we were just kidding." So, but they didn't even plan to offer those assurances until they needed things to change. So, I think it just goes to show how big of a case this is, how many people are complicit in it, and why it's all the more important that we fight for Julian Assange.
Yeah, and here's the other part that I think it makes it really outrageous. There had been testimony that the U.S. CIA, that our intelligence group and organizations, and that the people who run the intelligence organizations had in fact discussed it with people all the way up to and including the President of the United States. They plotted to take extrajudicial actions. They plotted to kidnap Julian Assange and assassinate him, literally go completely outside of the court, kidnap this guy like the mafia and rub him out. And so I'm thinking, okay, you're in a court of law, you're using the judicial process, but we already know that you discussed going outside of the judicial process, outside of the legal process, and acting like criminals and thugs. It is absurd to me to hear someone talk about, well, we thought about rubbing Garland out, but since we didn't rub him out, you can trust us, our insurance is in court. That's what I think is the most outrageous part of the court even in any way, shape, or form accepting the assurances, any assurances of the same U.S. government that said, and it came out in that court, that they had plotted to kidnap the guy and rub him out.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it also goes to help the United States in a way for them to kind of like assert their power across other countries, to kind of be like, well, we can just use our words and you'll essentially listen to us. Like, we don't really, there doesn't need to be any truth behind what we're doing. This is just what we've decided, and we're like kind of like being nice to you, like nudging you, and this is what we need you to do. So like, let's just make this easy because we both know we want to get rid of Assange. Yeah, it's all around awful.
The other thing I think too is this. I am cynical about this whole process. I'm sure you've heard people say the punishment is the process.
Yeah.
I think part of it is, particularly if you think about it, you know, the November's coming up and the midterms, and the you know, the Biden team, God knows they got enough problems as horrible as they are. And I really don't think that they want to bring Assange home and have the media have to, you know, face people saying to the, you know, the mainstream media, what are you doing? You're in the media. How come you're not standing up for this guy? Maybe the ACLU, I got my issues with the ACLU, but they've said that they're going to take the right position on Assange. I think they really want to drag this thing out, because one of the things I think is that the Biden administration, they don't want to bring him in and have one more controversy leading up to the midterms when they got enough headaches.
Oh, yeah, there's that too. And you could also look at it as just kind of like getting back at Julian Assange for the things that he's uncovered, because as long as they keep this back and forth going in the court process, he's still in solitary confinement in Belmarsh. So they continue to torture him as much as they can by keeping him there. So it's like kind of a double-edged sword, where it's like they don't want to bring him back because they do know it could cause the headache, but also they still need to scare other journalists to keep others from doing the same and trying to follow his path. And then using that as well to kind of ensure that he just dies in Belmarsh, that's how he goes out. So the blood's on no one's hands. They can say, we didn't do this.
Good point.
And kind of just, and also make it so that he doesn't become, in a sense, a martyr, where people are like, because they didn't kill him, to then kind of keep it so that people just end up forgetting about who he is and the work that he did as time continues.
Yeah. And he's already had a stroke. And so they can just say, well, you know, his health is going, and COVID, whatever the case may be. I think you're right. And I think a big part of this, I think you just hit on, a big part of this is what? He exposed the US's war crimes in Iraq. He exposed the CIA's use of the Vault 7 malware and how they lost it. So he exposed their incompetence. And you're right, a lot of this is revenge. And to me, when we find out some of the things that we found out in court, such as I said, they were thinking about kidnapping the guy and rubbing him out. When we find out that one of their principal witnesses, it was like a pedophile guy, a convicted criminal, a diagnosed sociopath who's back in jail now for another crime spree, and they're still moving on with the case. I think you hit the nail on the head in that the U.S. government is still up to no good. Every time we turn around, it's like, oh yeah, there was drones in Syria and they killed a family of 10 or whatever the case may be. I think a part of it is I'm a journalist. To some extent, I consider you somewhat of a journalist because you do a lot of activism work. They want people like us always looking over our shoulder, always thinking, yeah, you see Julian Assange, what's going on with him? You could be next. Keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, and I think it's too more than just keep your mouth shut. It's like, don't dig deeper, don't look for the truth, don't find like single source documentation. Don't think you can ever use our actions against us ever again for, whatever purpose it may serve.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. How did you first find out about Assange? How did you kind of get involved? And I consider it a movement. I consider there's a movement out there for Julian
Yeah.
Assange. We're hoping it's growing. So I never asked you this, but I'd like to know, how did you first get started in the, Freedom for Assange, Action for Assange movement?
I actually think it was a couple of years ago when I would go to the live tapings of Redacted Tonight. And I think
yes.
did he mentioned him, did a segment on him, and that was because I didn't really know a lot, so that kind of piqued my interest. And then I researched a little more, and I was like, how did I not even like know this was a thing until right now? And then ever since that, I've learned more about everything, and then been continuing to go out to actions to support him.
In fact, I'm glad we brought it up because there's an event upcoming, and I would be remiss if I didn't share it with everyone. Let me see. Oh, darn. Somewhere around here is an event. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Forgive me. I'm not set up to share screens. So basically, Washington, D.C., it's Sunday, April 10th at noon. It's going to be called In the Damn Wars. We'll be holding, they call it a Pots and Pans March. It's going to be, again, they always do the In the Damn Wars thing. It's going to be for de-escalation with Russia, to put an end to the senseless wars. I'm going to be one of the speakers there. So of course, whenever I speak at anything like this, I always bring up Assange because I think that Julian Assange's work and his current plight are inextricably linked to the anti-war, the anti-empire fight, because the things that he was exposing, he was a journalist. He was exposing. People were sending him stuff, and he was exposing it. But I think when you talk about ending the wars, particularly when you look at what he's in for, when you're talking about stopping empire from dominating the planet. To me, anytime you talk about that stuff, you have to bring up Julian Assange. What are your thoughts on Julian Assange's link to the anti-war movement? And I know you've been involved in that also.
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. And then I'll also add, and the Damn Wars is making that event near the day before, I think Action for Assange, they're planning a protest. I believe they're thinking outside of the DOJ again, but that could all change. But I know just the date's going to be the 11th, which is going to mark 3 years since Julian Assange has been in Belmarsh, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly. And so, yeah, I think it's really important that he gets mentioned at anti-war movements. Really, you hope to see that it kind of gets mentioned in movements across the board that are grounded in speaking truth to power, because that's what he used his platform to do, to give a voice to other people, to be able to show what was going on, in hopes that people could make their own decisions about what they wanted to do with that information going in the future.
You make a good point that just kind of rung a bell, and that is, whether there are people who are pushing now who believe that the narratives that we've been fed for COVID are questionable and should be researched further. There are people, of course, when it comes to the war, when it comes to empire, when it comes to a lot of the propaganda that we're being told about a lot of things, economics, etc., feel like we're kind of being had. And I think that Julian Assange is important, and keeping him in mind with all of these things is critical because, as an example, if there was somebody at the CDC, if there was someone involved with the COVID measures, with the COVID decisions, with the initial gain of function work, or et cetera, if there was someone involved in that stuff who had some information and may want it out, Julian Assange would be the one who'd be there publishing it. And I think when I look at what's happening with that, when I look at the questions, that legitimate questions that people have about the COVID narrative, I often think, man, if Assange was out, a couple of things. The comments that he would be making online, on Twitter, etc., which are so powerful, and the fact that that would be another outlet for people who felt like, look, I can get this information to Assange, whatever it is. And WikiLeaks has a tremendous record of not exposing their sources and of reviewing and publishing accurate information. So I think even the whole COVID thing and all of the things that the government are doing that have people that people have questions about and feel like maybe they're being misled, that Assange's name should really be injected into all of these things, because he was like a clearinghouse for information for the deceptions that we were getting from our government. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree with that. And also, I think it would, because there's a lot of other independent media people who have been doing a really good job bringing facts and data to the conversation of the current COVID narrative. That I think if Julian Assange, say, was leaked something in regard to that and he did publish it, it then instantly gives more legitimacy, I guess, in the greater public's eyes of what the people in independent media who may have found similar things through other documents and things like that. It would instantly make all of that more legitimate in that sense, which I think is a really powerful thing, because it then you can go into that next step of saying, so this is how the current narrative is, but then here's how it connects to the broader picture of everything else and all the other ways that the government's corrupt and the things that they're doing, and how it may not seem like it's affecting us, but it really is. And so I think that's the biggest thing, I think.
Yeah. And the other part of it is this, whoever it is, someone comes out and they find something to do with the COVID narrative and they bring out the questions and they're painted as a kook. They're painted as a crazy conspiracy theorist. Look at this kook. They're saying, they're questioning the numbers. They're questioning whatever the case may be when it comes to the COVID narrative. And I believe here's what I believe. It's always legitimate to question the government because they've lied to us so much and so frequently. They have such a pattern of lying that it's legitimate to question the narratives that we're given by our government. But people are just dismissed as crazy conspiracy theorists when they have legitimate concerns and legitimate questions. If Julian Assange were still out there, he has such a powerful record of accuracy that if he were on Twitter, or if he was still, which they'd probably censor him off Twitter. And as powerful as he is, though, if he moved to another platform, he'd take a lot of people with him to the other platform. So if he were there, he would be such a powerful voice. I know he'd be questioning this stuff, and they wouldn't be able to paint him off as some conspiracy theorist kook, because let's not forget, the Democrats, when he was bringing out information about the George W. Bush administration, he was their hero. They loved him. He was the Hollywood people loved him, etc. So they couldn't just write him off as some kind of a conspiracy theorist kook. I think it would make it much more legitimate, and he would open a lane for people to question some things about the COVID narrative that have been difficult to find a mainstream lane to question these things without getting crushed by you're a conspiracy theory kook bludgeon.
Oh yeah, for sure. And also because of the fact that when you do look back, WikiLeaks has never published anything that's false or had to retract anything. As well as also WikiLeaks wouldn't have to be focusing their resources that they currently are on the case with Julian. So not only is it just Julian Assange that's away, it's also the extra resources that WikiLeaks had because they have to they are continuing to put their time and energy into freeing Julian. So it's also even I feel like it's probably affected other things that could have come through there. But yeah, and that's like the last thing they want is people questioning this stuff. And because it's the information when it is released is the single source documentation, there really isn't much opinion put to it. It makes it easier for it to cross, I guess, political spectrums, because it's so easy to categorized left, right, Republican, Democrat, liberal, libertarian, whatever. And as soon as you put that label on it, depending how a person feels about that certain group, they will instantaneously decide, oh, this is it. This is either gospel or this is the worst thing. This is like the worst lie ever. And we don't even have to look at it further. Like, this person said it, boom, done, whatever. So it would make it a little harder to paint those things that they don't want people looking into that conspiracy theory category, essentially.
Yeah, you bring up a good point that I would like to discuss just a bit. We'll be maybe another 5 minutes or so here. And I think what you brought up is extremely important in the political conversation today, in the activist conversation today, in the anti-war conversation, and of course in the Julian Assange conversation. That is this. People label, they label and then discount. For instance, oh, well, Tucker Carlson said it, so we can't listen to it. This person said it, so we can't listen to it. That person said it, so it's it's right wing or it's left wing. And these are people that don't even really understand the ideological foundations of left and right and wing. They now say, if 10 conservatives believe something, and I say, yeah, I think they're right. Oh, that's a right-wing issue. That's a right-wing trope. It's not right-wing because conservatives believe. That doesn't make it right-wing or left-wing. There are actually ideological definitions for right and left. But what we've got, I think those things are insidious, and I think they're malign in that what people are really doing is this. They're saying, I don't want you to talk about that issue, and I don't like right wingers or left wingers or socialists or whatever. What they're really saying is, I don't like the issue. I don't want you to talk about the issue. So I'm going to label it a right wing issue. And then if you talk about it, well, I don't have to listen to you. Nobody should listen to you because you're a right wing kook. When I feel like this, I don't care if it's Tucker Carlson. I don't care if it's Rachel Maddow. If they say something that's true, it's true. And if they say something that's false, it's false. If I agree with it, I agree with it. If I don't, I don't. And I think the direction that we're going in now, I consider it an anti-intellectualist direction that says we're not going to accept things that are true or false or substantive or non-substantive. We're just going to label it. It came from the wrong person. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we're already seeing it happen now. And I think, and not even just like if a person doesn't want to talk about an issue, I think it's also used if someone has never even had to think about that issue before, like it's never crossed their mind. So they go to the first thing, they kind of shut it down because they also don't want to admit that they just don't know. And it's unfortunate, it stops all dialogue and even if it's still opinions from one side or the other, it leads like to you a place to be able to find the truth and to give you more avenues to find things, as well as ways to talk to other people who may be on one side or the other about an issue to see, okay, how can I frame this but still keep the message true to what it is, to kind of open these people's eyes so we can be on the same team in, searching for the truth. And I've even seen it already, like people, like if I say something that seems like totally outlandish, and if it's to one of my friends, I know they like take it a little more seriously because they trust me as a person. And so they're like, okay, well, this doesn't sound weird, but like, I know I have a good relationship with Christine, and like, I know she does research and she like is thoughtful about the things that she says. So, okay, I think I can like look into this, especially during the election recently. I had friends who like I hadn't heard from who would talk to me and who weren't sure like about Bernie Sanders, and then we're like, oh, we're Democrats, like, but we do care, we want things to be better for everyone. I would like tell them things, and that pushed them even in the primary to closer to Bernie Sanders. And then so it's just they want to keep everything labeled because then they can keep it divided so that they can stop conversations like those from happening.
Yeah, I think you're right. And the other part of it is this. Look, if you got people out here that's working and you try to make a few dollars and they got bills to pay and whatever, they might have kids to feed. They may need, they need a roof over their head. They need health care. They need certain things, education, etc. Well, that one person might be a conservative, one person might be on the left, but they have the same needs. And I think a big part of this has always been this: how do we divide the working class, the working poor, and the poor? They have the same needs. If they all look at the the billionaire class, the millionaire class, they'll realize they're being had. But if they get together and start discussing things, they may find out A, they have similar needs, and B, that they're being lied to and taken by the same people, and you may get some level of unity. And I've always felt like a big part of it was the narratives that have to be used to keep the lower classes, working poor, and poor divided, so they won't realize how much they have in common to push back against the concentration of power in the hands of a few oligarchs.
Yeah, and they've been doing this forever. So like this is nothing new to them. They can I think the way now they've been focusing it is if you get that like slightly upper middle class person who is perceived in their friend groups around and more knowledgeable, get them to be the ones that are this divisive and that they categorize things this way, so that when the people who do work often don't have time to like look up things for themselves, they go to their friends that they expect to have that information. So they don't even see where the divisiveness is coming from, because they're able to, because they understand how like our psychology works and how easy it is to kind of make you think you thought that thought yourself. Yeah, so I think, yeah, it's just, it makes things more difficult, and then it's hard, especially with the way like social distancing and all that other stuff, to be able to have those one-on-one conversations in person and stuff, which again, I think, it's all intentional for their aims. So I've still seen the conversations happen and have been able to be part of them, even still with things being as difficult as they are. So even though things are so divided, I don't think that's a reason to give up. I think that's just a reason to work harder to, unite them more.
All right. We've been talking with Christine Solomonic. Let me let you know again, and that going to be Sunday, April 10th, noon in Washington, D.C. The location is to be announced. We're going to do it's going to be a pots and pans march, end the damn wars. Christine and I will definitely be there. They'll probably have, did you say you guys are looking at doing something for Assange maybe the day before?
The day after, yeah.
The day after. Okay,
the
great,
11th,
great.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So we will keep you updated. And thanks a lot, Christine. Hey, I really appreciate your work. I really appreciate all of the stuff you do, particularly the work on Assange, but all of the, the activity you're involved in.
I appreciate it. Thanks, Garland.
Do you want people, what's your, for people who want to follow you on Twitter, what's your Twitter handle?
Oh yeah, it's _Chris X Teen. So CHRISXTINE.
All right. _Chris X Teen, CHRISXTINE. Follow Christine. Like to ask all my loyal and friendly followers to follow Chris also, and she will keep you. You follow her. She's probably even better than I am on Assange, and she's going to be able to let you know what's going on. A couple of things. If you're watching this on Twitter, or if you're watching this on my Facebook feed, then go to my YouTube and show and click the thumbs up and subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell so you will be notified. At Garland Nixon on Twitter, Garland.Nixon on Instagram, which I'm not on my Instagram nearly as much as I should, and just plain old Garland in on Facebook. Thanks a lot, Christine. I will talk to you soon.
Yep, talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll be back soon. And free Assange.